Gabriel was 23 years old and had just moved to a small coastal town, looking for a fresh start after the end of a troubled relationship. He rented a room at the back of the house of an old family acquaintance, Helena, an elegant woman in her 40s, married to Arthur, a local businessman who was constantly away on business trips. The place was peaceful, surrounded by tall trees, with the constant sound of waves crashing in the distance. That was all Gabriel wanted. Peace. Or at least, that's what he thought. From the beginning, Helena was very welcoming. Long looks, conversations that went beyond cordiality, and subtle gestures that left Gabriel uncomfortable, but intrigued. Their daily coexistence made the tension between the two increasingly evident. Helena was magnetic, intelligent, and had a provocative humor that contrasted with the constant silence in the house. Gabriel tried to keep his distance, remembering that she was married, but there was something about her, or perhaps the loneliness they shared, that inevitably attracted him. The first real conflict arose on a stormy night when the power went out and Helena called him to help her with candles and lanterns. He climbed the stairs of the old house with the flashlight in his hand, his heart racing for no apparent reason. Helena was waiting for him at the door of her room, wrapped in a silk robe with an enigmatic smile on her lips. "Do you scare easily, Gabriel?" she asked, laughing softly. He swallowed hard, not knowing how to respond. "I would like to take a brief break to ask for your like and subscription to the channel. You are helping us a lot with this simple gesture, and I would like to know which city you watch us from." At that moment, it wasn't just darkness that surrounded him. It was the risk of crossing a threshold. It was the kind of tension that couldn't be dissipated with words. From then on, nothing would be the same as before. The peace he sought in the small town began to dissolve into a whirlwind of confused and dangerous emotions. After that night of the storm, the atmosphere between Gabriel and Helena never returned to normal. The looks became more intense, the gestures more charged with intention. Gabriel often found himself distracted, thinking about her. And although I tried to rationalize, set limits, I felt like I was already being pulled into a game that I barely understood. Helena, in turn, seemed to dance on the edge of danger with total control. During breakfast, he left dubious comments such as, "There's something interesting about you, Gabriel. Maybe it's your apparent calm." Or even, "It doesn't even seem like you're just passing through." Each sentence seemed like an invitation in disguise. He wasn't sure if she teased him out of boredom, desire, or mere fun. Everything got complicated when Letitia, Helena's niece, came to spend some time at the house. Letitia was the same age as Gabriel, was friendly, outgoing, and visibly interested in him. The problem is that, at the slightest sign of closeness, between the two, Helena seemed cold and controlling. Once, when she saw them laughing together in the garden, she simply interrupted the conversation with a dry tone. "Leticia, help me in here. Now." Gabriel realized that Helena didn't just want to seduce him. There was something more, a kind of silent possessiveness. And behind that always calculated smile, he seemed to hide something deeper and more dangerous. Arthur, her husband, was almost a shadow. He would come back for a day or two, stay locked in the office or go out for appointments, without really caring about what was happening at home. When Gabriel first saw him, his presence was overwhelming. He had a suspicious look, almost as if he already knew something. When saying goodbye, however, he was direct. "Enjoy your stay, boy, but don't exceed your limits." The tension grew. The atmosphere in the house was already suffocating, and Gabriel felt like he was being watched. Leticia was a refuge, but also a risk, as her approach attracted Helena's attention even more. The game intensified, and Gabriel no longer knew who the hunter really was, and who was the prey. On a Saturday night, the house was silent. Leticia had gone out with friends from the city, and Donna Celia, the housekeeper, had gone to visit a sister. Gabriel took advantage of his absence to prepare a simple dinner for himself, seeking some peace in the growing chaos. As he was putting the dishes in the sink, he heard soft footsteps, and when he turned around, he found Helena leaning against the doorframe, wearing a burgundy satin robe. "You cook well. That surprises me," she said, smiling almost wistfully. Gabriel responded with a shy wave, trying to maintain emotional distance, but Helena approached slowly. "You know, sometimes I feel like this house is a prison. Everything seems too perfect on the outside, but inside, it's empty." Her eyes fixed on his. "You're the first one who's really looked at me in a long time." He tried to argue, but words failed him. When she touched his face, it was as if the air had gone out of the kitchen. And then it happened. A kiss. Slow, full of desire and guilt. Gabriel walked away soon after, confused, disturbed at having given in to that silent tension that had surrounded them since the beginning. That night, he didn't sleep. And the worst would come the next day. Letitia returned early, and as she passed through the corridor, she heard low voices coming from the office. Curious, she leaned against the half-open door and saw Helena talking to someone on the phone. "He's already fallen. He's involved enough not to suspect anything. Now the most important part is missing." Letitia backed away, shocked, not just for hearing his aunt's cold voice, but for realizing that everything was part of a plan. Gabriel was a piece, but which game? Hours later, Letitia confronted Gabriel without telling him what she had heard. It just warned him. "You need to be careful with her. My aunt. She's not who she appears to be. And if you don't snap out of this now, you could really hurt yourself." Gabriel felt the ground open beneath his feet. The kiss, the looks, the sweet words. It could all be part of something much darker than I imagined. And then the doubt set in. Had he fallen in love with Helena? Or had he fallen into a perfectly orchestrated trap? After the conversation with Letitia, Gabriel started to see Helena with different eyes. Meetings that previously seemed spontaneous now seemed meticulously planned. He asked himself all the time, how true had everything been? Doubt was a constant, shadow. And the more I thought, the more I noticed signs I had previously ignored. The way Helena always knew where he was, how she manipulated conversations, how she created an emotional bond that seemed too natural to be a coincidence. In the following days, Gabriel moved away. He spent more time away from home, visiting the library at the university where he had previously studied, seeking refuge from the academic routine. There, he met an old classmate, Clara, who now taught literature. She was a breath of lucidity. Conversations with her helped him regain a sense of who he was and what he wanted in life. "Sometimes, we get lost trying to please others." "Gabriel," said Clara, in a cafe after class. "But the worst thing is when we get lost trying to fill a void that isn't ours." Meanwhile, Helena continued trying to get closer, but he no longer reacted in the same way. Their gazes were still intense, but now he saw something beyond seduction. He saw calculation, coldness, and a sadness hidden behind every smile. One day, Gabriel found an envelope hidden in Helena's office. In it, there were documents and printed email messages that suggested something deeper. A plan to take control of part of Letitia's inheritance, using Gabriel as a pivot of an alleged betrayal, enough to tarnish the niece's image and reverse the trust that the family patriarch had in her. Gabriel was in shock. The doubt was now certainty. But instead of exposing everything, he decided to do something more difficult. Talk to Helena. "Are you really going to use all of this against your own family? Use me?" he asked, looking at her. Helena didn't cry. He didn't even try to explain himself. He just looked at Gabriel with a sad smile. "I just wanted a little power, control over my life. And you were the only one who really listened to me. I thought Maybe it could be different with you. Gabriel left the room without saying anything else. Inside, he felt destroyed, but also stronger. For the first time, he wasn't the insecure, impressionable boy who had arrived there. He was someone who had learned, even if the hard way. Days after the discovery and the silent confrontation with Helena, Gabriel decided that he needed to put a definitive end to that story. It wasn't enough to leave. He needed to clarify the truth with Leticia. She deserved to know. He prepared a detailed letter, telling everything he discovered and explaining how he had been drawn into that web without realizing it. But before sending it, he decided to face once again the woman who changed everything. He found Helena in the garden, sitting under a tree, looking lost in the sky. She looked fragile, for the first time without the armor of seduction that always surrounded her. "Are you going to tell her?" Helena asked without looking at him. "She needs to know, Helena. She needs to know everything. Not only about what you did, but about me too. I was not innocent in this story." Helena sighed, closing her eyes for a moment. "I didn't expect to fall in love with you, Gabriel. But that doesn't justify anything I did. The truth is, I never knew how to love properly. I only learned to defend myself." Confession took him by surprise. There was sincerity in those words. For the first time, he saw Helena without a mask, just a woman hurt by accumulated choices and frustrations. But compassion did not erase mistakes, and it didn't even diminish the impact that everything would cause. Gabriel delivered the letter into Leticia's hands that same night. She read in silence, eyes fixed on the paper, expression serious. When he finished, he remained silent for a few seconds that seemed like an eternity. "You could have left without saying anything, but you chose to tell me. This shows me that I can still trust you, in some way." Relief came like a breath, but the atmosphere was still heavy. The next day, Helena left the house. There was no scene, no farewell, just a taxi, discreet suitcases, and one last exchange of glances with Gabriel on the balcony. He nodded. She smiled, saying nothing, before disappearing around the corner. At that moment, Gabriel felt neither victory nor pain. "I just felt certain that I had done the right thing." And that, in itself, was liberating. After Helena's departure, the house gained a new silence. A silence that did not suffocate, but that brought a feeling of relief, as if the air could finally circulate lightly. Leticia maintained her routine, but with a new emotional distance. Gabriel, even though he was still staying there, felt that his time in that place was coming to an end. In the days that followed, he started helping with small renovations around the house as a way of saying thank you. He painted the porch, repaired the garden fence, and took care of the orchard with care. Each action was an attempt to return something of what had been broken. Leticia, little by little, opened space for dialogue. They sat together in the kitchen for coffee, chatted about trivialities, and even laughed at situations that previously seemed too heavy to be funny. She no longer blamed him. She understood that they had both been drawn into a game that neither of them started. But it was still too early for complete forgiveness. "Do you know where you're going now?" she asked one night, as they watched the sky from the balcony. "Not yet. But I know I can't stay here. I need to find myself again. Understand myself outside of here." Leticia nodded, understanding. "The house was a break in your life, and maybe in mine too. Now we continue." The next morning, Gabriel packed his bags. The farewell was discreet, without tears, but full of meaning. He left with the feeling that, although nothing had gone as he imagined, everything had gone as it needed to. As he got on the bus, he looked out the window one last time. There was Leticia on the balcony, with a cup of coffee in her hands and her hair tied up in any way, as always. She smiled. He smiled back. And then, the bus left. Gabriel didn't know exactly what awaited him, but something inside him had changed. He left behind not just a home, but a version of himself that no longer made sense. The road ahead was long, but for the first time, it felt open. 2 years had passed since the farewell. Gabriel now lived in a coastal town in the south of the country, where he worked as a diving instructor and ran a small guest house with a couple of friends. It was a simple life, but it brought him peace, something that previously seemed unattainable. On his bedroom wall, he kept an old photo of the balcony where he lived with Leticia. Sometimes, at night, when the wind blew from the sea with that gentle melancholy, he would sit in the hammock with a book in his hands and let his mind wander through memories, not with regret, but with gratitude. That period had been the catalyst for change. The pain, the desire, the mistake, and the affection, they had all contributed to the man he was now. Leticia, in turn, renovated the entire house. She painted the walls, light colors, changed the living room furniture, and filled the garden with vibrant flowers. He returned to teaching painting and opened a studio where young people from the community could learn art for free. His life gained color, literally and emotionally. Gabriel was an intense but not painful memory. A memory that sometimes came to her while she was scrolling through a screen or preparing coffee and made her smile all by herself. Helena? He never came back. He left traces on social networks, new passions and empty provocations. But over time, even this ceased. She moved on in her own way. One morning, Leticia received a letter with no return address. It was simple, handwritten, with just a few words. Thank you for everything, for seeing me when I couldn't even. She held the paper gently, took a deep breath and placed it between the pages of the favorite book she kept on the shelf, as if she were filing an important chapter in her life, but she had already turned the page. Their story never had a conventional ending, but perhaps that's why it was so true, because some connections don't need to last to be real. Sometimes it's enough that they exist, and leave something beautiful in the place where there was silence before. Don't forget to like and subscribe to help us.